Hello everyone, I'm JG and welcome back to Music Forever, where today we're reviewing the new album from The Killers, Wonderful Wonderful. Alright, so this new album that we have here from The Killers. Now when it comes to my own personal history with The Killers, they're a band that I've been familiar with really for a good while. However, I've never really been super into all their albums, not because I dislike them or anything, I just haven't really gotten around to becoming super invested in this group, I guess. I've always liked them. I have had no reason to really dislike them. I just haven't really explored the discography quite as deeply as some other artists, I guess. That's not to say I haven't heard their discography. I've heard all their albums before. I do like all of them to some degree. They have some great material that they put out. Of course, everybody knows and loves Mr. Brightside, but we gotta talk about this new album here today, Wonderful Wonderful. And overall, I'd really have to say that this album is wonderful. See what I did there? That was awful, I'm sorry. But yeah, I do think that this album overall is pretty good, and just overall pretty good album, all considering that the band hasn't put out material since, I believe it was 2012, or maybe it was it was 2012 if I'm not mistaken, when their last album was released. The funny thing about that is, that album was released, I remember back when I was just first starting to really get into music and become really invested in music. It was summer of 2012, I believe, that's when the album was released, if I'm not mistaken. I could be slightly off, maybe it was spring. But it was around that time pretty much. And so this is really the first album from The Killers that's been released while I've been, I guess a more critical person when it comes to observing and listening to music. So I was kind of looking forward to this project, and I'm surprised that the album managed to be as good as it is, given that, it's been quite a bit since their last album was released. Not a super long time, I guess, but more than, I guess, a normal length between albums. So this album overall, I think it's pretty good, like I said before. I like the opening track, the title track, and it has sort of this grander feel to it that when you're listening to it, it's just a nice album opening track. It feels like it definitely belongs at the start of the album as the opening song, because it just starts the album up and I guess establishes the overall feel and just concept of the album in a very nice way. It gets the point across right at the beginning, so you know what you're in for right at the start. About this project, the Killers decided to kind of stick with their sort of sound that they've acquired for themselves over the years, this sort of new wave rock, alternative rock type sound that I think works pretty well in a modern context, because while the Killers have kind of used the sound throughout their career for over 10 years now, really. Of course, they have made changes here and there from album to album and sorts. But just given that the type of rock music that's really popular right now, or at least a type of rock music that's really popular right now, is kind of like an 80s throwback type sound. There's so many bands doing that nowadays, so many older bands too kind of going towards that sound. It kind of makes sense in my opinion that the Killers would be able to stick to their sound to some degree and be able to pull off a sound like that really well, because it just works so well in my opinion. And the Killers do kind of pull that off here on this project, kind of having a bit of a throwback type sound that, I think they've always had to some degree in their sound, but, here it just works naturally for the band, and at the same time is what's kind of popular in alternative rock music at the time, which I guess happens to be a really good thing for the Killers, considering you have tracks like The Man here on this album, which is just a really fun song. This track is so much fun, and it just, if any other sort of alternative rock band had released something like this, I feel like it would have been considered a throwback track, or something that's trying rather hard to be an 80s leaning type song. But here, this just is so much this really is a Killers song, a real true and blue Killers track. At the same time, it manages to have this sort of fun feel to it that is just really infectious. This is just a blast of a song, and it's a great follow-up to the first track, Wonderful Wonderful. And after that track kind of sets the mood for the entire project, kind of has this big grand feel. You have this really fun track, which is just a blast, like I said before. I also like how you have some other more energetic tracks like Run for Cover. That was another one of my favorites, if not my favorite here on the album. This track was actually written, I believe, back during one of their older album sessions. I believe it was either Day and Age or Sam's Town. One of those albums, it was written during that time period, but they hadn't released it until now. And it still fits nicely within the context of this album. I mean, of course, they did probably make a few changes here and there to account for the new sound of this project, but it does fit nicely within the context of this project overall. And I do like the energy that this track brings as well. It's just another, not exactly in the sort of really fun and infectious kind of way that The Man is kind of more of just a general sort of energy that this track has. Maybe even a bit of, not exactly anger, but a bit of aggression in there to some degree. If I had to complain about anything here on this project, it would just have to really be that during the second half of this project, some of the tracks don't really stand out to me quite as much. That's not to say that any of them are particularly bad or, in any way or not good. It's just that they're not super standout compared to some of the tracks that we get early on in the track listing, like the three I've already discussed before. That's not to say these tracks are bad. Like I said before, there's some of them that I think are actually rather good, like Tyson versus Douglas. I think that's a really interesting track. I like the storytelling that's going on here, as well as the closing track as well. Have all the songs been written, which is just a nice, how wonderful, wonderful kind of starts up the album and provides us a very solid start to the project. This song kind of does the opposite in that it's a nice closing to the album. It just kind of ties everything together nicely. But the three tracks that we really get in between these, it's not that I dislike them or anything, it's just, the three of them back to back to back, I really don't care for them as much as some of the others here on this project. But once again, I don't think they're bad songs necessarily. Maybe they could have worked better had they been placed in a different order in the track listing slightly, because I think these three tracks just kind of blur together when I'm listening to this project overall. But the first half of the album, like I said before, is a bit stronger in my opinion. It does have a lot of really standout tracks, like The Man and Run for Cover, Wonderful, Wonderful. Rut's another interesting one. I also like the story that's being told there as well. Overall, I have to say that this project, even though there are a couple of songs I don't think stand out to me quite as much, overall I have to say this project is really solid. There's a lot of really standout songs, like the ones I've already mentioned before, and the ones that really don't stand out quite as much, they're not bad either, like I said before. They're just kind of, okay. And, like I said, they're not so much bad on their own as they are, maybe in the context that they were placed here on this album in the track listing. And I think that, listening to them on their own, they're not bad songs by any means. So what I'm pretty much getting at here is that this album consists of tracks that range from great to just, good. So that's a pretty good thing for this album overall, because it makes a really solid and really enjoyable experience for the most part. Especially because this album doesn't exactly drag or last too long. It's only 10 tracks, a little over 40 minutes in length, which is just a very nice, concise time for an album. Not too short, not too long. It's just, it's there, it's to the point, it says what it needs to say. It doesn't feel like it's rushed, but at the same time, it doesn't feel like it's dragging itself out for the sake of doing so. Even though it's been a good few years since we've gotten a project from the Killers, I don't feel like they went into this project trying to make it as long as possible to compensate for the time that it, has been between album releases here. I feel like they were just focused on making a good and solid project here, which is what they managed to pull off in the end, and that's what I'm really happy about. Overall, yeah, Wonderful, Wonderful is, like I said at the beginning of this review in a terrible joke, a wonderful album in my opinion. Definitely one that you should check out if you're a fan of the Killers, if you're a fan of alternative rock, even kind of like new wave, kind of throwback type sound if you're a fan of that. The Killers are a band that definitely should be on your radar, and this album for sure should definitely be a song, an album that's on your radar. Especially just check out the song "The Man" if you're not convinced. That's such a fun track that, if you like that track, definitely check out the rest of this project because you will enjoy it if you like that song, or even just anything else the Killers have put out before. Overall, yeah, this is a pretty solid project in my opinion, and I highly recommend you check it out. And also, make sure you leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on future album reviews. Comment down below what were your thoughts on this project. I greatly appreciate knowing. Follow me on all my social medias, linked in the description down below. And thanks for watching, guys. Stay golden.